Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this very exciting day today, the 10th of August 2023. Temperature in Brisbane 15 degrees and sunny. Well, it is a glorious day out there by this time of the day right here in Brisbane. From where we sit, we overlook the Howard Street Wharves, the Story Bridge, and the valley end of the city, and everything just looks amazing here. We are, the corner location where our studio is, up high on about 30 floors up above, and it's beautiful. Well, right now, let's move on with the news. Commonwealth Bank is cutting lending rates for oil and gas projects.
The big four banks and their funding of fossil fuel projects has come into focus. The Commonwealth Bank's climate update has taken a significant step, effectively ruling out any lending for oil and gas projects. It also includes ending funding from 2025 for fossil fuel clients that don't have independently verified plans to cut their emissions. The updated policy sends a warning that funding for fossil fuel expansion plans is drying up. If we take a look at the funding history of the big four banks since 2016, the comparisons and the changes are stark. In May, environmental group Market Forces published a report titled Banking Climate Failure. It found CommBank has gone from being the biggest fossil fuel lender to lending the least in those 6 years. At its peak in 2018, CommBank loaned $4 billion for fossil fuel projects. In 2022, it was down to $267 million, a 92% decrease in 4 years. Now, we'll get into the pros and cons in more detail shortly with our guest, but to spell it out and compare, the good out of this latest move is new project finance restrictions, new corporate finance restrictions, transition plan expectations, and the inclusion of bonds in fossil fuel restrictions. On the downside, the changes have no new restrictions on new or expanded LNG projects. There are no new restrictions on metallurgical coal mines. No corporate finance restrictions for companies developing new coal, oil and gas projects. And also, CommBank will only require clients' transition plans to align with limiting global warming to well below 2% and not the more ambitious goal of 1.5%. Will van der Poel is the acting CEO of the advocacy group Market Forces, which has been tracking this bank activity, and he joins us now. Will, a significant step for Commonwealth Bank. Welcome news, no doubt.
Thanks, Gemma. Yeah, really a big step forward today. The Commonwealth Bank has clearly set itself apart from the other major Australian banks with this new policy update. Now, of course, it isn't perfect, and as you pointed out, there are gaps and much more work to do. But this is a really significant step forward, and one that is really a credit to the thousands of customers, shareholders and general community members who've taken action over the past years to demand that Commonwealth Bank, our biggest financial institution, really step up on climate action.
So there you are, ladies and gentlemen, the Commonwealth Bank leading the charge there by cutting the lending for gas projects. Well, right now, as we know, a few years back, we had the situation of doctors who came under false pretenses. Here's one such story.
In one of the state's major regional centres, an imposter lied his way into the hospital for 6 days.
I think he deceived the staff to gain access into the emergency department and then purported to be an intern when he was unregistered.
The overseas trained man was recruited as an intern in Port Augusta without registration, but with his name on the roster, he was able to gain access. The incident prompting 2 reviews released today. One found flaws in recruitment processes that saw the doctor, who had a professional disciplinary history and a criminal history of deception and dishonesty around registration, proceed without serious scrutiny. The other reviewer found the man was prematurely integrated into the health system, which saw him become overly familiar with the hospital, where he was able to assume the role of an intern as an imposter before being registered and certified.
It was very clear, or should have been very clear to him, that he was not registered and he was therefore not eligible to work under any circumstances.
What an absolute balls up. This is a situation that represents a failure at so many different levels.
Among the more than 60 recommendations across the reports, staff conduct a Google search for all applications, and that SA Health review and revise its criminal history screening policies. While no incoming employees should be put onto a roster before their recruitment is finalised, and access cards shouldn't be created or issued to potential staff members at orientation. SA Health says it accepts all the recommendations.
I think our staff's honest view that they would not be deceived by a health professional was a significant contributor to this incident.
The Health Minister says the reports highlight extensive deception and will be used to improve systems. The opposition says the government must now do everything it can to ensure a similar case doesn't happen again. Bethany Alderson, ABC.
And what the terrible thing to happen, because so many people's lives and things depend upon that. And if someone had a criminal record and a history of fraud around registration and things like that, that should be kept away, completely banned. Don't even come near a hospital. Checks and balances really need to be put in place. As we know that a lot of trust and faith have been put into health professionals, and someone at that level no one would have suspected, and probably that's how he sort of managed to probably slip in. But once again, there needs to be better scrutiny. Well, right now, let's look at this report where a community gathers and rallies around the resident home destroyed by a suspicious fire.
A house gutted by a ferocious blaze, leaving its owner facing an almost incalculable loss.
Well, everything except the clothes I was wearing and my car and my dogs. It's like this all through. You can see him through the house. There's nothing left.
Charred remains of Les Ferguson's possessions, including his 2 prized motorbikes. All that's left of the Darwin River home he's lived in for more than a decade. Tonight, he's sleeping on a swag on the back of his ute.
Not much else I can do. Just got me dogs and me, and I got a car. So start again, I suppose.
Red Cross workers among those lending support as Mr Ferguson tackles the trauma of losing nearly everything.
Friends and even people I didn't know, they're just coming up and helping, and my swag and everything got burnt last night, so I'd lended a swag off a bloke I hadn't even met before last night.
100 metres from the buildings there.
A few doors away, Sue and Gary Ferrari watched as fast-moving flames encroached their property until, with the help of firefighters, they managed to steer it away.
The neighbouring property caught fire for some reason. It jumped the road, ignited our place and burnt us out, yeah.
As the fire raged, this tavern became a makeshift evacuation point.
People were very anxious, yes. Yeah, because, it just flew down that road.
The fire did?
Yeah. 1 minute it was there and the next minute it was way down there.
Making matters worse, authorities believe the blaze was deliberately lit during a total fire ban.
If you think about somebody who would light a fire under these conditions and put that type of pressure on residents, then that's a really malicious act.
Property owners here in Darwin River are trying to come to terms with the extent of the damage caused by yesterday's blaze. Meanwhile, police and fire investigators are trying to find out exactly how it was lit in the first place. They're calling for anyone who may have information to come forward. Matt Garrick, ABC News.
And such a terrible thing that the fire would have been deliberately lit when there isn't complete fire ban. These kind of things do happen, and as was mentioned in the report, that's a malicious act. Well, right now, let's look at the final report into the derailment and the break. Reckons that there was a breakdown in the process.
This was the devastating scene that shocked the nation 3 years ago. 2 people died when the Melbourne-bound XPT train derailed in Wallen, injuring several others.
Our prayers, our best wishes are with the families of both the driver and the pilot.
I'm not in a position to be able to speculate this morning on what may or may not have caused this incident. It's just so important that we let the safety regulators do their work.
Today, the Transport Safety Bureau released its final report after 3 years investigating the incident. It reveals the tragic incident was due to speed exceeding infrastructure design and a lack of available risk controls.
In most likelihood, he had an expectation to remain on the straight track, where the line speed was 130 kilometres an hour, as the train would have passed through Wallen.
The ATSB confirmed a fire in a signalling hut 2 weeks earlier had disrupted communication, meaning drivers travelling through the Wallen Loop, which reopened that day, were receiving important route changes on paper. The train driver was travelling through the crossing loop at a speed of up to 127 kilometres per hour. The ATSB, however, says the paper document passed on to him instructed a maximum speed of 15 kilometres per hour, a message they say the driver was likely unaware of.
There was no protocol in place to confirm the driver's understanding of the detail contained in the train authority, with no requirement for the driver to read back or confirm an understanding of the revised instructions to the network control officer.
There's a myriad of problems here that highlights the urgent need to change in the industry and safety reviews.
The report made 37 findings, including 15 relating to safety issues, concluding the rail system is in need of several technology upgrades to ensure this tragedy won't happen again. Courtney Withers, ABC.
So there you go, a systems failure, a communication failure. So many times when you pass on a message, that's just not enough. If it is critical, you have to make sure that the recipient acknowledges that they have received that message. And that's the key finding out of that there was a paper message that was sent because due to some technical breakdown in there, and that the driver of the train might not have understood or looked at that, and he just went about the normal speed, and the rail and the track was just not up to handling that kind of speed at that time. So there you go, a system failure, a communication failure. Well, First Nations people have always displayed their fashion, and none other than these few companies who put on their fashion show every year on the ramp. Let's join them.
A runway for emerging Indigenous leaders in fashion making strides in the industry. Country to Couture now in its 8th year and bigger than ever before. A national platform for artists like Kidja woman Rowena Morgan returning after a 2021 debut.
It's like hard to describe because there's lots of mixed feelings as an artist because it's just that next level. Yeah, so you're feeling humbled but passionate as well.
A record 22 collections gracing the runway in last night's sellout show in Darwin, drawing in artists from diverse communities from Gumbaynggirr country in New South Wales to the Yawuru Nation in the Kimberley. An opportunity for art centres to celebrate the legacies of artists who've passed on.
We always feel connected to them, like, you know, we get little signs around the art centre that indicate, yeah, they're still with us.
With cross-generational fashion collaboration helping culture to thrive.
I come from a family that was part of the stolen generation, but it helps me learn more about my culture more. So it's really getting that time to connect and learn about the different stories and the families that hits home.
Setting the pace for stellar future careers.
It's really important for the Indigenous fashion industry as it's still emerging and a lot of people are wanting to get into it, but they don't know how.
I'd like to continue on making clothes and teaching people how to make clothes and maybe a bit of modelling.
Sowing the seeds for future success. Lillian Rangia, ABC.
And really hope that it keeps up, and it's beautiful to see those creations incorporating the Indigenous art into the bringing them all onto that runway. Well done. Well, age-old tradition, mullet catching. Well, the window opens in Sunshine Coast.
Kings Beach on Queensland's Sunshine Coast is popular all year round, but in winter a different crowd gathers as schools of mullet migrate north to spawn.
The run only lasts for around 8 weeks a year. Sometimes it'll go out to 10 weeks if the temperature of the water doesn't drop fast enough.
From the beach, teams of licensed fishers wait for the right moment for hours and sometimes days.
Could be sun up to sundown and then on afterwards.
Once the fish start jumping from schools spawning in circles, it's time to act. Catching them is a precise art, as the mullet need to move into waters just off the beach, away from the rocks.
The net is poled in the back of the boat, and as you go, the boys hang onto it and it just creates a semicircle out around the fish and hook it up to the utes and try and get them on the beach.
Sea mullet mostly live in estuaries and freshwater. Catching them off the shore in nets is only allowed for 4 months a year. Most of the fish are sold to commercial suppliers, but bystanders lucky enough to see a catch pulled in can buy the mullet fresh from the beach. Fishers say with no new licences being issued, the 100-year-old tradition is a dying art, but one that should continue.
Everyone deserves fish. So from the person that's walking along here that has no idea how to catch a fish, that's who I work for.
I'd love to do it for the rest of my life.
Meg Bolton, ABC News, Caloundra.
So there you go. There are some of these traditions that will eventually die off, if not, for reasons such as that there will be environmental groups coming in and protesting and all those kind of things that will happen. But it's a tradition that's been going on for a very, very long time. Well, right now, Pat Anderson reveals the truth behind the Uluru Statement from Heart.
Pat Anderson, welcome to 7:30.
Thank you, Heather. Thank you, Sarah.
It's very nice to have you. Now, the Uluru Dialogues that produced the Uluru Statement from the Heart, it was a long process. There were 12 dialogues. You were present at all of them. And these notes that were being discussed in Parliament today, they're the notes of those dialogues. One commentator today described their contents as being hate-filled and divisive. Now, you were at those dialogues. What was the debate that you witnessed?
Let me explain first of all. The Uluru Statement from the Heart is a one-pager. It's 439 words. Now, attached to that is pages called Our Story. And what is recorded there is our history according our version of history. And yes, there was, as you do in these kinds of reports, we recorded everything that people said and that you have a true account. We did this on purpose. That's what we were supposed to do, to record what people said. In another context as well, a lot of that people were distressed because we went out not long after Tony Abbott, when he was the Prime Minister, took about, and I'll stand corrected, I'm sure people will check it, but about $500 million from Aboriginal programs and what have you. So a lot of the smaller wraparound services and others disappeared overnight. So people were angry, upset, distressed. In fact, we hadn't counted on this, and so the first few hours of every meeting was spent and we sat back and listened and heard what people said to us about what had happened to them and how that withdrawal of funds automatically, they didn't write and say, well, we're not going to fund you next year. They just disappeared. So that did cause a lot of anger and distress. So we recorded everything that people said. So that's what's in, and it's called Our Story. That didn't need people to accept that or vote on it. That's the responsibility of the Referendum Council, of which I was co-chair, which you just said, with Mark Liebler. So we faithfully recorded what people said. And out of that whole dialogue process, the Uluru Statement, the words and the sentiments that are expressed there, somebody said it at some stage during that whole process. So I don't know what to say.
Let me ask you this. You also described it as the hardest work of your life. It's one of the most important pieces of work. Why was it so hard to arrive at the Uluru Statement?
It's difficult to get consensus. And with this level of distress, people were angry. So it was... That's why we let people say whatever they wanted to say, not that we were going to stop them in any way, but it was only after that process that we were able to settle down, if you like, to the program that we had, taking out the five terms of reference that we had. We were entrusted to take out to everybody. So I just want to make one point here too. A lot of people don't understand this. Those that was the terms of reference and going out as we did, that was a long process which began first with Julia Gillard a long time ago, and it was Mr Turnbull and Bill Shorten who were in, it was a bipartisan, and after that whole process, I think we had like 7 reports, 10 reports in about 10 years or something.
Yeah, so
there was a whole series of a time of revolving door prime ministers as well.
So,
there was all this report, all this work that's been in the public arena for this latest iteration, 12 years. But of course, we've been doing this since 1788.
Yes, well,
the latest iteration.
Let me come a little bit to your story to understand this. So your own mother was a member of the Stolen Generations. You grew up yourself in a camp outside Darwin. I want to know this: how personal is the Voice referendum for you?
I think it is for most First Nations people. Most, we share. The history of this country is bloody and it's bitter, and it's full of pain and anger and distress. And we have been trying, we've done all the heavy lifting. We've been trying for a long time to get, acknowledgement, recognition, or to be included in the political life of the nation and be part of it. So we've been totally excluded by all kinds of segregation, both political and social and so on. When I grew up in Darwin, was up in Prep camp, and I'm very proud of all of those people were herded there. We had lots of camps around Darwin, as they were in every little town, every town in Australia. There were these communities. So we lived on the edge of town. There was an old word that we used to be called fringe dwellers. But anyhow, so that's where I grew up in Prep camp.
Let me, sorry to interrupt you, Pat, but I wanted to ask you something about that, because one of the arguments of the No campaign, and in fact Warren Mundine made this argument on our programme, that the opportunities for young Aboriginal people, for young Indigenous people, are so much bigger now than they were for you in the 1960s. There's been so much in advancement. He makes that argument to say we don't need a voice because of the advancement that's taken place since then. How do you respond to that?
Well, that might be Mr Mundine's response, but the level of disengagement and disconnection and all of the problems that we have, the challenges rather, that we face, there's not a lot of difference in them. In some communities are worse off than others. There's a bit of difference there, but never.
Yes, there is that difference, and as we know, that there's 2 sides of the equation: the yes and the no. And many people believe that why should anyone, any person in this country be treated differently? That everyone should have an equal opportunity, everyone should be included, any help, support and guidance that can be given must be given, and just leave everyone, to the equal opportunities that exist in this land. I don't feel there would be people stopping anyone from coming into the political arena or seeking employment. Well, if you choose not to, then it's who's to be blamed. That's one of the things. I know there is always it's very easy to blame the system, to blame someone else, blame others, blame legislation, and blame everything else. Of course, there have been contributing factors, but I think in today's day and age, a lot of advancement has been made towards equalization and moving away racism and the very strong anti-discrimination laws that exist right here in Australia. So just everyone be equal, be given the equal opportunity to do. Of course, some communities might need more assistance in training, getting them up to speed. But just having a political voice, is that the right answer? That's the big question. Well, ladies and gentlemen, right now, it's time to go to some of our functions and events. So, ladies and gentlemen, there you are, the update for today on the 10th day of August 2023. And with that, it's time to say goodbye until tomorrow, and we'll see you then.